Hello everyone. The following presentation is a brief summary and analysis of Chapter 10 of Oscar Wilde's novel The Picture of Dorian Gray. Now that Basil has left, Dorian begins to get suspicious of his personal servant Victor. Dorian imagines Victor taking a sneaky look at the covered painting. To ensure that this doesn't happen, Dorian has an idea to get the painting moved from his living area. He arranges for his housekeeper to bring him the key to the old schoolroom at the top of the house. This room is almost like an attic where Dorian would receive his education when he was a young boy. The housekeeper is confused at this request because the room has not been used in many years. Even though she is a little confused at the request, she shows no suspicion and compliantly hands over the key to Dorian. It is interesting to note that once the painting no longer just portrays Dorian's beauty and innocence, but now reflects his true degrading soul, Dorian decides to hide it from others and from himself. This idea lends itself to the standard in Victorian society that appearances and reputation need to be maintained. In other words, the ugly parts of people were always hidden from others. Dorian finds an old Venetian embroidery cloth to cover the painting. Venetian simply means that this cloth comes from Venice in Italy. Dorian has dark thoughts about how this cloth could have once wrapped a corpse, but unlike a corpse, the painting that this cloth will cover will keep on living and showing him his corrupt soul. For a moment, he regrets not sharing this information that burdens him with Basil. Suddenly Dorian feels an appreciation for the care and adoration Basil has showed him, but Dorian reasons that it is too late for that kind of affection to save him. As mentioned before, the novel is full of cover-ups, hiding true parts of oneself to keep up one's reputation in society. This Venetian cloth just happens to be a literal cover-up of what Dorian doesn't want society to see. This Venetian embroidery cloth is also typical of Dorian's luxurious collection of objects, as the cloth itself could be considered a piece of art. Despite his wish coming true that he would remain forever young, and even though he is saved from aging, the feeling of his impending doom is becoming more evident. Dorian feels a sense of anguish at how the face in the painting has changed again. It seems that the face's look of cruelty has become more severe. After deciding to hide the portrait because it begins to show signs of his inner corruption, Dorian instructs his servant to arrange for the frame makers to come to his house under the pretense of repairing or adjusting the frame. However, Dorian actually just wants the frame makers to discreetly move the painting to the old schoolroom where no one will see it. This painting that Basil has created is possibly large and very heavy, thus Dorian's not being able to move the painting himself. Dorian covers it quickly just as his servant enters to tell him that the frame makers have arrived. To get the servant away, Dorian sends him out with a message for Lord Henry. Dorian lets the frame makers come inside. The frame makers express their joy and delight at having the opportunity to do business with the charming, well-known gentleman that is Dorian Gray. This is the beginning of Dorian's descent into secrecy and guilt, even though at this point in time he maintains a composed outward appearance and his public reputation remains intact. It is clear that the discrepancy between his private life and his public life is growing. Mr. Hubbard, the master frame maker, is enthusiastic to show Dorian the frame he found for the portrait, but Dorian only wants the portrait moved. Mr. Hubbard and his helpers carry the painting to the schoolroom at the top of Dorian's house. Dorian observes the schoolroom, and he notices that it is unchanged from when he was a boy. For a moment, he remembers the lonely hours spent in the room as a child. Dorian locks the portrait in an unused room in his house, which is far away from the eyes of any visitors Dorian might have, ensuring that his reputation and his home appear all intact. The memories the schoolroom elicits of his childhood make Dorian yearn for his youthful and innocent soul. He begins to loathe and resent the aging of the portrait, and imagines just how awful the portrait will become in the future. With certainty, he decides to keep the portrait securely locked away. Mr. Hubbard, the frame maker, is curious to see the painting. Remember, it has been covered this whole time. But Dorian brushes him off, saying the painting wouldn't be of interest to Mr. Hubbard. Dorian finds no comfort in his thoughts and memories from his youth and from the schoolroom itself, nor does he find comfort in his thoughts about the future of the painting as it continues to age. By locking the painting away, Dorian is able to exercise a sense of control over the painting. Dorian is relieved for a moment now that the painting has been safely hidden away. However, the sense of relief is short-lived because Dorian becomes paranoid that when his servant Victor returns from his errands, he will notice that the picture is missing from the living area in Dorian's home. Dorian's paranoid mind imagines Victor as a spy. To try and get this thought out of his mind, Dorian distracts himself with reading materials Lord Henry has sent over. One of the reading materials is a newspaper in which Lord Henry has marked the article reporting on the investigation into Sibyl Vane's death. The reminder of the terrible details of Sibyl Vane's death angers Dorian, and he becomes very annoyed with Lord Henry. Seeing this article about Sibyl Vane flares Dorian's suspicions about his servant Victor once again. The influence of the painting is so powerful that even hiding it has not changed its power over Dorian as he thought it might. Dorian's narcissism makes him feel like he is a victim here. He sees Victor as a spy and Lord Henry's interest in Sibyl Vane's investigation as a cruel insult. Dorian feels like all eyes are on him. Dorian looks at another package Lord Henry has sent. It is a book with a yellow cover. Just a side note on yellow books during the Victorian era. In the 19th century, especially in Britain, novels with scandalous, risque, or morally questionable content were frequently covered in yellow paper. This was to make a more conservative person aware that the contents of the book might be considered offensive or distasteful. Dorian becomes completely captivated by the story of the main character, who is a young Parisian man who embraces sin and morality at the same time. The novel's hedonistic philosophies fascinate Dorian so much that he is late to meet Lord Henry. Of course, Lord Henry is very pleased with Dorian's reaction to the book. This just means that Lord Henry's manipulation in turning Dorian into a hedonist is still working. It is not only the painting that is a representation of Dorian Gray. Dorian now finds a representation of himself in the main character within the Yellow Book, almost as if the story was written about him. Lord Henry's giving Dorian this Yellow Book is another way in which we can say that Lord Henry is very calculated in his manipulation of Dorian. We can argue that Lord Henry purposefully selects this specific book for Dorian because he knows Dorian will relate to the main character and the plot, which will further expose Dorian to the life of embracing pleasure and disregarding morals and virtue. Thank you for watching this presentation on Chapter 10 of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Keep an eye out for summaries and analyses of the rest of the novel.